What if I told you there was a man who survived for 60 years in an Egyptian desert? Meet St. Paul of Thebes. In the barren Egyptian desert, a young man named Paul made an extraordinary choice. At just 15, he lost everything: his parents, his home, and his safety. As Rome's persecution of Christians intensified, he knew he had to vanish. But where could a frightened boy go? He found a remote cave, a sanctuary for solitude. A cave once used for a dark purpose, making counterfeit coins. But for Paul, it was a place of transformation. With nothing but the whisper of the wind and a spring for water, he discovered a life devoid of chaos. A raven became his sole companion, bringing him bread each day. The miraculous gift mirrored the story of Elijah from the Bible. Years slipped by slowly. Paul thrived in his solitude, basking in prayer and meditation. His peaceful resolve inspired others, like Anthony of Egypt, who sought a deeper faith away from the noise of the world. In 342, the two would finally meet. In a dream, it was revealed of Paul's existence to Anthony, and Paul, in turn, heard whispers of Anthony in the air. When Anthony arrived at Paul's cave, they greeted each other as if they were old friends. Despite years apart, they knew each other's names. They were soulmates in faith, guided by divine intervention. What's the outside world like? Is there still pagan worship? Paul asked, curious about the life he left behind decades ago. Anthony shared tales of the changing world, stories of struggles, of churches rising, of hope. Paul, now 113 years old, sensed the end was near. He asked Anthony to go back and retrieve a cloak gifted to him by Saint Athanasius. Anthony honored Paul's wish, embarking on a journey to find the cloak. On his way back, he received an incredible vision. Paul's soul, glowing and radiant, soared toward heaven. When Anthony returned, he honored his mentor. He wrapped Paul's lifeless body in the cloak, a symbol of their eternal bond. Even lions approached, recognizing the holiness of the moment. They dug Paul's grave with reverence. Nature itself mourned the loss of a saint. Before his transformation into legend, Paul made history. The very existence of monastic life can be traced back to this extraordinary hermit. His life inspired not just individuals, but whole communities seeking God. Venerated by Roman Catholics, Eastern Catholics, and Orthodox Christians alike, Paul's influence grew. New orders formed, like the Order of St. Paul I Hermit. His legacy lived on through the ages. Imagine a life so dedicated to solitude and divine connection that it inspires generations. St. Paul of Thebes is more than a name. He represents the fierce pursuit of holiness. But let me ask you this. If you had to choose between the chaos of the world or serene solitude with God, which path would you take? St. Paul of Thebes, pray for us.
St. Paul of Thebes reminds us of the profound need for silence in our lives, a silence that is increasingly rare in today's noisy world. His life in the desert, stripped of distractions and chaos, allowed him to hear the voice of God clearly, undisturbed by the clamor of the outside world. Silence was not just a part of his life. It was the foundation of his communion with God. In our modern lives, silence can feel impossible to attain. We are surrounded by constant noise, alerts from our phones, the hum of technology, the chatter of daily life. Yet, it is in the quiet that God speaks most clearly. We need to teach ourselves, and those under our care, especially our children, to embrace silence. In a culture that equates busyness with worth and noise with productivity, carving out moments of stillness can be revolutionary. Teaching children to find peace in quiet spaces, whether through prayer, reflection, or simply sitting in God's presence, instills in them a lifelong gift. They learn that silence is not empty. It is full of God's presence. Imagine creating small moments of silence each day, turning off distractions, and embracing stillness. Whether it's pausing for prayer before a meal, walking in nature without headphones, or sitting quietly with a child before bedtime, these acts of intentional silence teach us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. St. Paul's story reminds us that even in solitude, we are never truly alone. In silence, we find God. St. Paul's encounter with St. Anthony also reveals the beauty of teaching others about silence. Though Paul lived a life of solitude, his example drew Anthony closer to God. By living a life centered on silence and prayer, we can inspire those around us to seek the same connection. Silence doesn't isolate us. It draws us deeper into community with God and others who seek His presence. Let us take inspiration from St. Paul of Thebes and create spaces of silence in our lives. May we teach our children and those we influence that silence is not something to fear, but a gift to embrace. In the stillness, we too can hear the whispers of God, guiding us toward holiness. St. Paul of Thebes, pray for us that we may find the courage to step away from the noise and embrace the peace of God's quiet presence.